Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, and my wonderful wife is working in the pharmacy. So we're going to talk today with Diane Mueller about sex. And I wish my wife could talk because we love talking about the topic because we are all about health and wellness at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, and we understand that healthy people have regular sex, and regular sex keeps people healthy. So Diane is going to verify that, confirm that for us. So Diane, welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And you're so right. You're so right on this, like this kind of bi-directional relationship, right? It's almost this vicious cycle where when people stop having sex, they stop being closer and they stop wanting sex. And then that leads to then not having more sex. So then people just kind of spiral out of control that way. And I think it's such an important topic because, like you just introed this is really like the lack of interest in sex, the lack of prioritizing sex is just a symptom like anything else, like chronic fatigue, like fibromyalgia. Any of these things are just an imbalance in the body. And it's really important we take the taboo off of this. So I just appreciate
Yep.
the opportunity to, help you guys in your mission of really helping people understand that this is just a normal part of life. We got to get the taboo out and just start talking about this in our regular relationships.
Agree. Well, and we had a gal from Australia actually last week on our podcast to talk about fertility. And, there's been, just when we talk about sex and health, there's been a huge decrease in fertility in young men and women over the last few decades. And I think it's mostly due to, diet, lifestyle, and the reality of it is that as young men, young women, we should be, having regular sex with a monogamous couple and being fertile. And if we're not, then there's a problem. There's a health problem. If young men and women don't want to have sex, and I will even say older men, older women don't want to have sex, there's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, there's always just like anything else we do in holistic medicine, right? There's always more than one root cause. And what you guys are doing as pharmacists, like we have to fix the hormone levels. We have to fix the thyroid, right? There's so many basics there. We got to get the toxins out. Like that's a huge component of what leads to this. And that being said, like I've also worked with so many couples over the years that they do things like testosterone replacement therapy and test, of course, and make sure it's appropriate and it's monitored well and all the important, medical sides. But I have worked with many people over the years that get like a boost from that. And then all of a sudden they like their libido winds up crashing. That's not to mean that testosterone is not a huge part of the picture. Like we want to include that, but it's just one of many examples of, hey, there's multiple things that are actually leading to this low sex drive and low desire. And if we fix the testosterone, we fix the hormones, we fix the thyroid and get the toxins out, and we're still struggling, that's a huge sign that maybe we're bored, maybe we're not driving passion, maybe, so many women I think are in relationships where they are having sex like men do. And that's not how the female body is oriented, but we're not really taught how to, bring men together, have sex like men, bring women together, have sex like women, and work together to make sure that both people get their needs met. So I think there's, from that standpoint, we need to really think beyond hormone replacement therapy, even though that is a really essential foundational component of the sex drive.
Well, I'm going to say, even though, it's a majority of what we do is to sell hormones, I'm going to say, and I'm kind of speaking for my wife because she can't be here, but that's really, especially from a woman's standpoint, that's really, it's part of it, but there's so much more to go. Like you said, I'll give you a quick example. There was a gal that we started on testosterone. She was actually in healthcare herself. And I followed it and I followed up with her like 8 weeks later and asked her, how things work. She was not having a good sex life. And she says, well, my libido's better, but I'm not attracted to my partner. And she was married.
Yeah.
And that's something that testosterone is not going to help.
Right.
So can you discuss that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an example of like the multifactorial thing, right? It's like we can fix the fundamental drive on some ways, but if we're not attracted to our partner or we're not having the right kind of sex, we're never gonna, get past that ballpark, right? And so like another example of this is that women tend to have arousal before desire and men tend to have desire before arousal.
Mhm.
And so what I mean by that is desire is of the mind, arousals of the body. So for like men, an example of this is since they have desire of the mind prior to arousal of the body, is they see their lovely partner walk across the kitchen and they see the way her body moves if it's a hetero relationship. And they are like, wow, my partner looks yummy. And when they see that, that's in the mind. They're like, wow, this looks yummy. I think I want to, I think I want to play, right? And then that's in the mind. And then that translates to the arousal of the body. That translates to the circulatory response, the neurological response, and the genitals respond, arousals of the body. So, like the desire comes first, the arousal comes second. With women, it's the opposite. So many times women are looking for like their desire to be matched with their partners and be like, well, they're in the mood. I'm not in the mood. Gosh, it's like I'm almost like never in the mood, right? It can feel like that. And that's because women are oftentimes waiting for it to happen in their mind, for their mind to start thinking about sex. And not saying that can't happen. Of course it can. It happens a lot more for women in the new relationship energy side of things. But more commonly with stress, with overwhelm, with longevity, with long-term relationships, for the woman, how it works is the arousal cycle kicks in first. And so the common way I explain this is when a woman is like, wow, like I'm going to do this. I'm not really in the mood, but we haven't connected in a while. So I'm going to go for it anyways. And she's, maybe 15 minutes into playing, into making love. And then all of a sudden, we see that she has a thought like, this actually kind of feels good. And then at the end, maybe she tells her partner something like, that was actually really fun. Why don't we do that more often? Right. And so that's basically what's happening there. She's feeling the sensations of her body, and that's getting her aroused, right? That is leading to that arousal. And then from there, she has those thoughts in the mind, right? And so that's leading to it's like the arousal and the desire. So in a situation where it's like, wow, I don't find my partner attractive, there's a lot we need to do there, right? Like there's a lot of like, well, what's happening there? Sometimes that there is a physical attraction problem. Sometimes there's actually more of an emotional attraction problem. We know this from long term that if women or men start feeling like so emotionally unattracted to their partner, that then that physical attraction can change. And we see that, right? When people go through breakups and it's like, wow, somebody that maybe still is very physically attractive, all of a sudden a partner can be kind of like repulsed by the idea of actually being intimate with them. So I think one of the first things that, to really start addressing if somebody has low libido and it's like, well, I'm not attracted to my partner. One of the earlier things we need to really do is say, why am I not attracted to my partner? Is because I don't feel safe? Is because I don't feel safe? Is because they don't listen? Is because whatever story is going on? And that's one of the most important things in that example is really, dissect.
So you already mentioned a little bit without saying it about communication is so important. So tell us about like, you're talking about the woman enjoying it and we need to do this more often.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about how important communication is in a relationship and specifically talk about how men need to really I want to get your opinion on this. I mean, should men be driving that conversation or at least be the one opening it up?
I definitely don't think it has to be men, but I do think it has to happen. Like one survey, for example, that I found said that of all couples that took this survey, they basically ranked the ones in the category who were happy with their sex life, who said like, "Wow, I have really amazing sex." And out of the people that scored in that, "Hey, I have amazing sex. I love my sex life" part of the survey, 92% of them talked about it. So to me, that's like it's a pretty amazing, thing. And it's not surprising at all, especially because one of the things we know is that our bodies change over time. So in addition to like changing the chemicals that happen with longevity, right, of a relationship where we have all of those chemicals of a new relationship energy that tend to fade away unless, really addressed by month 18. In addition to that, we see that our bodies change, right? We know that when women go to pregnancy, this changes. Obviously, menopause, andropause. But we see that certain times, like throughout life, we can find that certain parts of our genitals might be receiving more or less neurological signal, circulation signal. Maybe there's scar tissue in certain areas. So we can see for a woman that, maybe G-spot orgasms, for example, felt really good. And now there might be not a lot of sensation there. So this idea of like not communicating it really beyond even just, having the expression and talking about what we like, what we don't, beyond even the importance of that, we really need to account for the fact that how we make love and what our body is going to need, want, and desire and be turned on by when we're 25 is going to be different at 35, at 45, at 55, 65, and so on. So that's one of the, huge reasons for this is just like everything else, our nutrition needs change throughout our lifetime. We tend to need different exercise strategies for health and longevity at different points of our life. So there's no surprise then, right, that our sex needs would change. And, to further, answer or ask, or respond to your question, I guess, around do men need to start this? I definitely don't think men need to start this. I think it's less important to say, think about who starts this and more important around the way we are having these kind of conversations. So I talk a lot about how, when, and where for these conversations. And one of the most foundational important techniques that I have seen is that when we are beginning these types of conversations, it's building a new conversation muscle. And we see like in relationship therapy and like relationship research, anytime there's a kind of a stressful type of conversation that a couple has to have, there's 3 threats to the relationship: threat to one individual, threat to the other individual, and threat to the group space. Right. But what's interesting when it comes to talking about sex is out of those 3 threats, which are in normal conversation, pretty equally weighted according to studies. When it comes to talking about sex, there's one out of those 3 that have the greatest threat, and that's a threat to the self, which essentially translates into, if I'm going to talk to my partner about sex, I'm going to be most interested, even if it's subconscious, about protecting my own ego. He has the biggest threat to himself, so he will be most interested in protecting his own ego as well. And so it's really easy to show up to these conversations and everybody is kind of protecting themselves. So everybody has an accentuated, say, desire or motivation to be on the defensive. So one of the intro level foundational skills here that I have seen with talking about this is, and really starting before we bring in conversations of like, well, I don't really like that thing. And, we need to stop doing that. It's not doing anything for me, which we want to eventually get to, right? But more the foundational, say, starting place for this is to talk to one's partner and be very specific about the things that you want more of. Like, wow, when you did that thing, and even if it's just a tiny little thing, the way that they brushed a hand across your thigh in that specific moment. Like, the more specific you can be, the better, and start naming it. And so the idea with this is you're setting this foundation about talking about sex is actually kind of fun because all the partner is initially hearing is like, wow, I'm really, really great at this. My partner loves these things. And we get a 2-part result of that. One part is that they are going to start having their confidence build up, kind of their conversational bucket, their emotional bucket gets really full. And so when we do bring up conversations around what needs to change later, it's coming from a place of fullness versus deficiency. And the second thing that does wind up happening for a lot of couples as we focus more on the things that we love, the things we don't like oftentimes just become they don't play as big of a role because our
Right.
partner is like, oh, I need to focus on this and focus on this and focus on this. So some of them will start to fall away. Not all of them will. We do need to come back and discuss that. But like I said, when we discuss those in like the more advanced ways of talking about this, where it's coming from a place of kind of a very full emotional bucket. So then we're able to go and hear our partner without being so much on the defensive because we've already had 100 different things said to us about how awesome we're doing. So if we hear 1 or 2, it's not so devastating to the psyche.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to get into some numbers if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. So we talk about, Jen and I talk often about healthy people have regular sex. So what is, regular could be once a year. I don't think that's healthy. Regular could be once a month. I don't think that's healthy. So what's the average and what is healthy?
It's, it's such from a medical perspective, it's like, I'm going to give you kind of my opinion based upon surveys and what I've seen. And then also like to talk a little bit about the medical perspective, which is a very, very messed up way of answering this question, which is if we're talking about low libido, low sex drive, the medical diagnosis for this is called hypoactive sexual desire disorder, which I know you know. And we get that diagnosis like as physicians, as doctors, we give that diagnosis when somebody reports to their doctor that they've had a low sex drive for 6 months. So if somebody comes to me and like, hey doc, I've had a low sex drive for 6 months, then I could diagnose them as hypoactive sexual desire disorder. But it's really this like psychological circular thinking, right? It's this circular logic to say I'm going to define it by itself, to say, oh, in order to get a diagnosis of essentially low desire, I have to tell my doctor I've had low desire for 6 months. It's like, well, that's such a stupid medical diagnosis
Right.
because it's like low compared to what? It drives
Right.
me nuts, right? And it's why this question's so important. So when I've seen surveys around, okay, when do couples report having the happiest relationships? How much sex are they having? And it is on average about once a week. And so when there's been other surveys that have looked at, okay, well, is there a significant correlation with couples that have 2 to 3, sex 2 to 3 times per week and relationship happiness increasing? There hasn't been anything that I have found that's statistically significant around going from once a week to 2 to 3 times per week. That being said, we always want to remember beyond a relationship, all the other things that the chemical oxytocin can do for us, the orgasm chemical, when we are actually intimate. And anything from helping with anxiety and depression have been studied to even there's a study showing that oxytocin can help reduce osteoporosis in women, which is, pretty profound, especially that being a huge thing in the menopausal age. We see improvements in sleep. We see improvements in happiness. So I generally look at this around like, okay, with surveys like that, my goal for people is to be having sex at least once a week, as kind of like the baseline. And then if you can get with your schedule and all that, you can get, 2 or 3 times a week. I think the extra health benefits are there. But that's my general recommendation is really at a minimum going for that once a week, because from a standpoint of relationship preservation and happiness of the couple that way, that does seem to be kind of like that sweet spot of like, we can all probably, we all should be able to prioritize committing to the person in our life who we say we are like probably valuing more than anything else, that we want to at least give them once a week to deeply commit, and then more if you can.
So what about orgasms?
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk that, if a woman does an orgasm, then there's a problem. And, and I think sometimes a man will feel maybe inferior. And, talk about what if a man does an orgasm?
Yeah.
Both of those are legit. And does it count as sex?
It's, 2-part answer. I mean, one, I do think part of having sex and having sex regularly and bringing a novelty to it and, working with desire mismatch is, I personally believe that it really helps to broaden our definition of sex, meaning as sex is, hey, intimately connecting with each other's, special erotic zones, erogenous zones, and it doesn't have to mean penetration, right? In my perspective. That being said, from a standpoint of orgasm, it's tricky, right? Because we want orgasm to not necessarily be the focus 100%, because sometimes when we hyper focus on it, sometimes what happens is like people get so obsessed around like, can I make her come? Can I make him come? That sort of thing, where all of a sudden they are focused more on that than actually the pleasure and kind of like the journey along the way. And that turns out to be problematic. That being said, we also want to pay attention to if we're not able to orgasm, whether we're a man or a woman, because that's also could be information from a medical perspective as well. So I do think, one thing is I like especially women to hear, because, statistically, there's way more women that have never had an orgasm versus men. And, and so if anybody's listening and they're like, yeah, I'm a woman, I've never orgasmed, just because you haven't had one does not mean that you're broken, right? It just means that you haven't learned how to do this yet. And part of the problem, I think, is that many women are having sex in a way that is much more like men do, right? And it's like what we see sometimes in movies and porn, like the scenes that are happening in movies around like man rips woman's clothes off and he's penetrating her in 2.2 seconds and she's having the time of her life. In about 3.5 minutes, she's like moaning with pleasure and she orgasms. It's just insane, right? It's just insane. It's not the way the woman's body is designed to work.
I mean, every time Jan and I watch a movie or whatever, Hollywood is just so, and don't forget that they wake up in the morning with makeup on and their hair is
great breath. They're like making out, tongues down each other's throat. Like it's just insane, right? So I think it's really, done. It's like that's fine from a fantasy perspective, right? It's like, but we don't watch movies like Superman and think that we can all fly. It's like, so when you come to like characters like Marvel and DC types of characters, we know the difference between fantasy and reality. And unfortunately with sex, we see these things and the brain doesn't differentiate. Oh, that's fantasy. That's not reality, right? And so we need to really begin to do that. And I do think it's a pretty crucial skill for women if they are having challenge with orgasm to begin to self-pleasure, to bring vibrators into the play. Definitely some women do have a harder time having orgasms through penetrative sex alone. Some research has shown that could be related to the distance of the clitoral head versus the vaginal opening, that the further away that distance is, the harder it is for her to orgasm from penetration alone. So, we want to consider this around like, oh, that's like so helpful to know, right? Because it's like the ability of a woman to do that easily or not could simply be related to her anatomy. So, there's great ways we can bring support in. For example, there's one partner company that I work with, Hero, has this like harness, this very, very slim harness that women wear around their pelvis. And it's just the teeniest, tiniest little vibrator that is placed on the clitoral head so that she can still have penetrative types of sex. But now she's making sure that she's getting extreme clitoral sensation. It's so teeny that men don't notice this much, if at all, right? So it works really well for partner play, so they can still have that intimacy, but she can work on making sure she's getting this type of stimulation that she needs. So I do think we need to broaden our definition of sex beyond just penetration. And I also think we need to stay open to the fact that, hey, we have different needs as women and men, and it might just be due to our anatomy. And the more we can bring in these other ideas without meaning it's like somebody is not doing something correctly. And all it means is we're just working with our unique anatomy. We're just working to come together and find different ways to share in love and be novel. If we can start to assign different meaning to these things, we can have a lot more success with integrating these other strategies.
So what are the numbers on percentage of women that can orgasm on penetration alone?
Oh, goodness. Trying to remember. It might be.
Is it more than 50%? Is it less than 50%?
It's less than 50%. It's
Okay.
less than 50%. It's I don't want to quote this inaccurately because it's been a while since I've looked up this exact number, but it's significant. It is very significant. And that's what's important for, couples to hear, especially hetero couples, because I think in homosexual couples, especially in lesbians, especially in females, there's a lot of understanding of this because, females just know other females, like, they know their bodies. But for men in hetero relationships, it can feel like some men I know that I've talked to are like, well, like I should be at a point where my penis can fully do this, or there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with her, right? There is such this misunderstanding of this around, hey, this literally doesn't mean anything. This just means that, hey, in order to provide great pleasure to a partner, which I think, majority of great partners, that's what they want, is they just want to be able to please their partner they love so much and provide pleasure for them and know they participated and, are a huge part of this. So I think the more we take away the taboo around like use of toys, use of these external ideas and devices, they're not to replace anybody. This is not about replacing. It's about adding to, so that she is able to connect more deeply and have more pleasure with her partner.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So I'm going to put you on the spot again with some numbers.
Please.
So what's the average time for sex, and is that adequate?
It's about 5 to 7 is what I've seen most surveys say. 5 to 7 minutes. And it's not adequate, especially when we look at like the female arousal system happening before desire, that mostly for most women, it's about 15 to 20 minutes before she is fully aroused.
Yeah.
So when we're having sex for 5 to 7 minutes, much of the time she is not even fully aroused. And so, one of the things that is important to bring up is it's very fun to work with a partner to try to orgasm at the same time or close together, right? That is a beautiful thing. But in the actuality of it, that is one of these things that is like a little bit harder to accomplish, to be able to give both partners their ultimate pleasure. So I really encourage people, like, take that away as a goal. Make your intimacy, make your closeness, make your pleasure, make your heightened experience, make that the goal, and not this like, orgasming at the same time. If it happens, beautiful. But I think that really messes with people a lot. And I would encourage, women and men, like, to actually spend, before we even get to penetration, spend 15 minutes, like do sensual massage, right? Do other acts, play, like, softly rub each other's genitals, do some oral sex, but like, don't do anything in that beginning that is really about leading to orgasm. And for men, this can sometimes involve the need of doing like tantric type of, mechanisms. Doesn't have to be tantra, but tantra works very well as a way of controlling the ejaculation. And so one thing that can happen is, like, what we really want to work on with both women and men is really staying in that threshold of like 7 or 8. So if like 0 is not aroused and 10 is orgasm, there's that point of no return. We get to like a 9. So when we work to kind of keep our threshold in that like 7 or 8 of like, okay, I'm turned on, but I'm not over my threshold. That's how, for women, they can have more profound orgasms when they expand that 7 or 8 for longer periods of time. For men, when they stay in that 7 or 8 and they don't let themselves get to that 9, they can tend to last longer. And that's where we can use, like in Tantra, one of the biggest things is using different breathwork techniques can work really well to kind of calm the nervous system, to calm the excitement as it's like pushing that 8. Using even different sounds can help, communicating with your partner around speed, right? So it's like we can start to communicate more. And the more we practice that communication skills, can be like, okay, slow down, take a couple of deep breaths together, keep it around that 8 and continue on. And that's like one way we can push from that 5 to 7 minutes, much more to that 20, 30, 40 and beyond.
That makes complete sense. So you've got a new book coming out, correct?
I do. It's called Want to Want It.
Let me stream that right up here. Tell us a little bit about it.
So it's basically for couples. So it's designed for cisgendered heterosexual couples. It's, of course, open to all audiences. But that is my classic client that I work with. So I just wrote from the point of my most experience. And it's really about how to want more sex. So it's like, okay, if you're finding that desire is down, it's about how to start to bring that desire up, how to get more of it, how to communicate more, that sort of thing, and then how to be better at it. So how to bring in some new techniques and whatnot. This book is focused on a little bit more heavy on some of the physical things that we can do. So anything from what lab tests to get ordered, different ways to think about things like HRT or working with your circulatory flow, how to actually improve pelvic floor health, deal with pelvic pain issues, lubrication, erectile dysfunction. But that being said, I do also include in there information on how to begin to communicate with your partner, how to bring that novelty back in, how to date your husband and wife again, and those sorts of things. So it is available for pre-order now. For anybody that pre-orders, you'll see on the page that I have 250 plus bonuses and climbing. For anybody that orders it, you do get all these additional bonuses, which are typically paid. You will get access to those for free as my thank you for support and pre-ordering my book.
That is awesome. You have a website also, right?
I do.
Tell us about your website.
So my website is My Libido Doc. So that's a great resource for you as well. So I have a lot of different paid and free ways of working with me. So on my website, you'll see my Hot Monogamy Club, which is, kind of think of it as like a online streaming program, but for sex. So I bring in experts several times a month, and there's almost probably close to about 50 pre-recorded videos now on how to enjoy your sex life more, how to have better orgasms, how to communicate with your partner and more. But you'll see there too at mylibidodoc.com, you'll see the freebies tab. So I have a free ebook on there. I have a yes, no, maybe checklist on there as far as how to bring novelty back in monogamy, and a lot of other free resources as well. So the freebies tab at mylibidodoc.com is a great way of, of just getting started on some of my work for free.
That's awesome. So I asked all of our guests what they have a passion for. What is your passion, Diane?
I mean, my passion really is in helping people have happy marriages, right? I went through my own divorce and am now 5 years into the happiest relationship of my life. And one of the things that after going through the trauma of divorce that really that's when I really started pushing this business, is really realizing that, I, like so many people, just fell out of love. And some of that was that passion. And my passion is helping people not get there. Besides my relationship though, and besides helping people have great sex, I'm really passionate about my step kiddos. I'm really passionate about snowboarding, which I do this last year 43 times a year. So I'm an athlete. So, just really passionate about moving my body.
That's awesome. And that's one thing about it is that the more you move your body, the healthier you can be to have good sex.
Exactly.
Those are just facts. It's, we talk about sleep, diet, and exercise all the time. And hormones are secondary to all of that, actually.
Yes.
But that's what keeps us healthy, and healthy people have regular sex.
It's true. Yep. And moving your body keeps you more limber. It opens up new positions and fun things you can do. There's so many benefits.
Well, and just think about, when you're not feeling the best, sex doesn't come into mind. Jan and I had a long bike ride yesterday, 4.5 hours in hot weather. We were exhausted in the middle afterwards. But imagine if every day you felt exhausted because you weren't taking care of yourself. Then sex usually goes away. And if people feel sick, they usually don't have sex. So, and that's a problem. I mean, if you're married and not having sex, you're just roommates, in my opinion.
Exactly. Ships passing in the night. And
I mean, it's what makes us different, right? Or you're just friends.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important. Sex is very important, and for our overall health, for sure.
It is. It's so true.
So thank you for helping us realize our goal, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. I appreciate it, Dan.
Thank you, Shawn. I appreciate you being here or having me here. I really appreciate it a lot.
And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Thursday to our midweek podcast, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you.